Hey everyone, Andrea Walford here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this Happy Birthday to You card featuring Stampin' Up's Happy Celebrations stamp set and using a watercoloring with dye ink refills technique. So let's get started. Today I'm going to show you how to create a card using this Happy Celebrations stamp set. So my son's 17th birthday is coming up this month and I wanted to have a card for him, so I thought, you know what, I might as well film a video tutorial. So now normally when I'm stamping my cards, I usually use a Stamp-A-Ma-Jigs, and if you've watched my videos you would have seen me use a Stamp-A-Ma-Jig in pretty much every card I create. And a Stamp-A-Ma-Jig is simply a stamp positioning tool. Now today I decided that I want to try to use my Misty Mini. This is a mini version of a stamping tool that was released a while ago, became incredibly popular. It's quite pricey compared to the Stamp-A-Ma-Jig, but in some cases it makes certain things much easier, and particularly what I'm going to be doing today, so the technique I'm going to be demonstrating, because what I actually want to do is I'm going to be stamping my sentiment like this, but I'm going to be doing it on watercolor paper. And so I want to emboss the outline of it. So in order to do that, I'm going to be double stamping it in my black Memento ink, and then I'm going to clean my stamp and I'm going to stamp it in my Versamark ink, and then I'm going to heat emboss in clear embossing powder. And I'll talk to you a bit about why I do that once I actually start watercoloring in my image. So this is the plan of what I want to do. Now I've already gone ahead and stamped it, and I quite like the position and where it is, so I'm probably going to actually go ahead and use this as a template. But first of all, I just want to show you this Misty Mini. So as I said, this is the mini version of the Misty, and it's just a little bit more manageable, also a little bit more affordable than the full-size Misty. Now when I bought it, it came with the Misty, it came with 2 magnets, this foam pad, and there was also these grid sheets. So if you're stamping and you know you're going to be stamping off, then you want to put a grid sheet underneath or at the very bottom underneath your cardstock piece. But because I know my stamping is going to be contained onto my actual cardstock piece, I'm not worried about that. I'm not going to do that. Now I did notice that because of the height of the Misty, so when you open it up you can see there's this little lip here, and because of that height, the stamp, when I put it on, it actually does not reach all the way down to my cardstock. So that's where this foam piece comes in. So I'm going to take my foam piece and I'm going to tuck it into my corner. And then I'm going to take my cardstock piece and I'm going to tuck that into the corner. Now, this cardstock piece is 5 1/8 of an inch by 3 7/8 of an inch. And it's watercolor paper, but it's not Stampin' Up! Watercolor paper. This is a fluid hot press finish watercolor paper, 140-pound weight. So it's similar to Stampin' Up's watercolor paper except for the texture. So Stampin' Up's watercolor paper is cold press and this is hot press. And the basic distinction between cold press and hot press is in the texture. So a hot press has a very smooth finish, very similar to cardstock, whereas cold press has, it's a much rougher texture, and it makes it really challenging when you're stamping fine images, especially like what you see in this text here, because you just don't get a nice clear impression because the stamp can't come into contact with the entire surface of the paper, so the texture gets in the way. So that's why I decided to do this card on some hot press paper. So I've got my paper in place, and now I'm going to anchor it with, actually before I do that, let's just get my stamp set up. So I'm going to put my paper here, and I'm just going to put my magnets to hold it in place. Now as you can see on I have my magnets spread far apart because they're extremely strong, and if they come close to each other then they snap together. And so when they do that, that actually means that they become very hard to separate. So I'm going to position this over top of my Misty. Then I'm just going to take, I have a ruler here, unfortunately though my magnets are going to snap to it, which is a bit of a pain in the neck. But I'm using a ruler just because I want to make sure that the top of my sentiment is straight. And from what I can see, it is. You see, now I have to extract my magnets. I don't know where I put my plastic ruler. So that looks like it's where I want it to be. Now I'm going to take this sentiment and I'm going to tuck it right underneath. It's a little more challenging when I'm doing this on video versus real time, because in video, if I were to stand directly over top of it, my head would get in the way. But let me see if I tilt it. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so now I've got my stamp in place. I'm going to close my lid and I'm just going to press. So what this is doing is this is placing my stamp onto my lid. Now you can see my stamp is still pretty sticky because it's brand new, so it was pulling up on the paper. Now this technique that I'm going to demonstrate for this card, it's critical that your paper does not move. Now once it has ink, it's not going to stick to it as much. It should be a little bit better, but you just really want to make sure your cardstock is well anchored in place. So now I'm going to take my Memento Tuxedo Black ink and I'm going to tap it onto my stamp. Then I'm going to take this, I'm going to close the lid, and I'm going to press. And I'm just applying pressure across the entire surface area. And then when I lift, you can see I have a pretty nice impression, except that it's not like perfect. So there's some areas where it didn't stamp quite as darkly as other areas. So this is where having the MISTI comes in handy, because all I have to do is just re-ink my stamp. And then I can double stamp again. Press down. You have to kind of get a feel for how much pressure to apply, because you apply too much pressure and you could squish fine lines, not enough and you're not stamping. So there you can see, I'm just going to close it again and see if I can press down right in that particular area. I think that's probably good. Okay, so now I'm going to grab a baby wipe, and I just have one set off to the side, and I'm going to clean my stamp. So I just want to get all that black off, because otherwise when I put my Versamark pad on there, or ink it with my Versamark pad will get very dark. Okay, so I have here a scrap piece of paper, because basically I just want to make sure that I'm drying it off, and that you can see when I pull it off, I'm looking to see if it left an impression, and it didn't, so it should be good to go. So now I just want to get my embossing stuff ready. So I have a coffee filter, I have my clear embossing powder, and off to the side here I have my heat tool. Now, oh, and my Versamark ink. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Versamark ink and I'm going to pat it all over my stamp, and then I'm going to close this once more and apply pressure all across. Now, because I'm working on regular cardstock, I'm not going to worry about double stamping this. Well, actually, you know what? Maybe I will. Just to be on the safe side, because I think my Versamark pad is drying out just a little. I have to re-ink it, so I'll usually double stamp just to be on the safe side. Okay, so now I'm going to carefully move my magnets and try to keep them far apart from each other, just so they don't accidentally stick together. I'm going to set my MISTI aside. I'm going to hold this over my coffee filter, and I am going to sprinkle on my clear embossing powder, flick off the excess, and oftentimes I like to keep a little brush that I can go in. I have brushes in various sizes that I can go in and use to make sure I get off the excess powder. And then here you can see the reason that I work over top of a coffee filter is because I can funnel my embossing powder in. Okay, now I did get quite a bit of embossing powder here, so let me just clean that off. Now when I heat emboss this, I'm actually going to protect my surface with this pad, simply because if my mat gets heated, then it starts to warp. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my heat tool about, I guess about an inch above this, and I'm going to heat this until it melts. Now the heat tool's kind of loud. Okay, so there you can see what that looks like. Now unfortunately when you heat emboss, your paper does become a little bit warped, so you can kind of gently try to shape it back the way it is intended to be. Now I have here, because it is still a little bit warped, a little bit of low tack tape, and I'm just going to stick this onto my mat here so it doesn't shift as I'm coloring. You want low tack tape because then when you pull it off, it's not going to rip. So now what I'm going to do is I am actually going to use a watercoloring technique using dye ink refills, and you can use an aqua painter, but I'm thinking that I may use one of my round brushes. I'm just looking over here because I want something. Well, you know what, we'll try the aqua painter and see maybe how it goes. I just don't know if it'll give it enough water. Or no, maybe not. Maybe we'll use a paintbrush. So I have here a cup of water. I just bought the cup because I really like how it looks. And I'm going to use that. And I also have my paper towel that I can blot my brush if I need to. Now the three colors of ink that I'm using are my Pumpkin Pie, Pacific Point, and Tempting Turquoise. So I'm going to place a drop of each on my imaging sheet. It doesn't have to be an imaging sheet, just, you know, whatever you want that you can create a palette. And I'm placing my bottle kind of behind it, just so that I know which color is which, because the ink color is so concentrated that when you just look at them, they all look the same. Okay, whoops. So now what I want to do, and this is the reason I embossed the outline of this. That's because when you put water, I don't want it leaking all over the place. I want it to stay contained within the letter. So I'm going to dip my brush into my water, and then I'm going to paint in this letter. Now I'm applying a decent amount of water here because I want the water to pull my color. So now I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to dip it into my dye ink, and I'm going to touch it to various areas of my letter. And you can see how my water is pulling it. So now I'm just rinsing my brush, and then I'm just pulling that, but I don't want to blend it too much, see, because what I want is some of that lighter and darker area. So I'm cleaning my brush off if I pick up too much color, and then coming in and then if you want to help it move, you can tip it, but actually I have this, you know, I don't think I'm going to, because I just want to see, what kind of effect, you know, you might get it like almost like a little bit of a tie-dye or marbled effect when you color it like this. Okay, so I'm wetting my brush again. Just want to make sure my water is clean. Now I'm going to go to my next letter. Now when you're watercoloring, you have to be very careful that when you're working on adjacent areas, actually it's better not to work on adjacent areas that are immediately touching. So if this were a flower, I wouldn't work on two petals that are side by side, because there's a high risk that your colors can run one into the other and then they get contaminated. So now this is the turquoise color. And because it's fairly intense, I don't want as much of it. No, I think, you know what? I did not put enough water down, and it soaked right into the paper. So that's kind of one danger of watercoloring, is that if your paper is not wet and you apply quite a bit of color, you can end up what happened to me, which is that instead of your color bleeding, it just soaks right into your paper. But we're gonna see if we can salvage this one. So far I'm not liking how it's looking. Let's see if there's anything we can do. Maybe when it dries it'll look cooler, cooler than it looks now. Well, we'll see. See, well, I still have water there. What I'm trying to do is bring some of that color and help it move. Okay, so let's try this with the orange and hopefully we will have better luck. Let's get a decent amount of water there. Okay, that's not good. My water is tinted blue. Make sure I clean my water here. Try this again. Okay, so now I'm just going to make sure my paintbrush has water there when I go to pick up my orange, and I'll be very careful how much. That's better. See, that's the way it's supposed to work. And now I'll clean my brush off and very gently help the color move. Now you see what you get here is kind of a very, it's a very kind of mottled effect. And yeah, I guess you could call it a tie-dye effect, right? So now let's try actually I'm going to do this one in orange because we got a little bit of a blue tint, and I suspect that's because I'd rinsed my brush in the water. So the water is probably tinged slightly blue. So before I get it more blue, we're going to do our other letter in orange. I'm going to pick up a little bit of ink. And you can see the more water you have, the faster it moves. That looks really cool. And then now I am going to, okay, that's clean, that's good. I'm going to apply water to this one. And let's try that turquoise again, see if we have better luck with it in this one, because I have a much bigger puddle of water. Oh, and I have one right where I didn't want it to be. Let's just hope the water doesn't travel out. See, in the meantime, I let too much soak into my paper. I got sidetracked there. I wonder if it's just this color, because I did not have that issue with the other two. Let me gently move this so all the little white areas are covered. And then let's come back. I'm going to blot my brush. I'm going to come back with a little bit more. What's going on here? Yeah, that is so weird. That has got to be... I'm guessing that that has got to be the color to a certain degree. But maybe if I kind of paint it in areas, it will sort of look like this is the way it was supposed to be. There we go. I actually really like how that looks. So the water's absorbing pretty quickly, and that's the thing when you're working with a hot press watercolor paper, is that it doesn't seem, to me anyways, it doesn't seem to have quite as much capacity to absorb water as a cold press would. Okay, so now I want to stick this onto some Pacific Point cardstock, and I'm thinking I want to create a little border along the bottom, and I've been trying to decide whether I want to have a black border. So let me take a look at that. I don't know, that just looks a little bit out of place to me. Or a blue border and maybe elevate it a little bit. You know, I actually kind of like how that looks better. So I think we're going to go with that. So first off, let me just make sure I don't have to trim this at all. And that looks good, so I don't. So I'm going to grab my Tombow Mono multi-liquid glue. This is like my go-to glue. This is what I use whenever I'm paper crafting. For everything. Just, I find it's quick and easy, and I don't have as much success like with Stampin' Up's dry adhesives. They're snail adhesive, and even the I think it's called Fast Fuse. I don't have as much success with those ones. The Fast Fuse, I get a great stick, but it doesn't apply nicely. So I've kind of given up on those, and I just use my Tombow Mono multi-liquid glue. Now, the nice thing is you have a little bit of time to rearrange your settings, not your settings, your alignment of your card, but you do have to give it a moment to dry. Now, you can use adhesive remover if you get adhesive anywhere. So there you can see how that looks. So now I'm going to apply this piece. So I'm going to apply, ooh, I have a lot of squish out there. So let me just see if I can spread that out a little bit. And I'm using the lines in my mat to kind of help me align it, and I'm just looking at it visually too. I think that looks straight. Let's hope it's straight because it's stuck down now. And now I want to go ahead and I want to stick this onto my card, and my card is a standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. I scored it at 5 1/2 inches and folded it in half using my bone folder. So there you can see how that looks. Now, this is a card for my son. Technically, I suppose one should not put bling on a boy's card, but I don't know. I have a hard time not putting bling on cards. So I'm going to grab my rhinestones. Now I always end up with mounds of the large rhinestones, and I use up my small and medium super quickly. I just find the big ones are just a little bit too big, so I end up with tons of these rhinestones. So I'm going to have to open one of my packs. So the visual path that I want my card to take is from the top left down this way. So we're reading happy birthday to you. So I'm going to start with a cluster of rhinestones up here. And I usually always work in clusters of 3, or at the very least odd numbers of clusters. And I'm not trying to space them evenly or symmetrically. That still has a little bit of the adhesive sticking. You know what, I don't like that one. See, that has a little bit of the adhesive. And then I'm going to put a cluster of rhinestones down here. And one overlapping my paper, just to help bring that into the design. So there you can see what my card looks like, and it's now finished. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial, and I look forward to stamping with you again. See ya!